In the set of lectures for this week, we address an important public policy issue that has had far-reaching political and social consequences across North America. The illegal trade in drugs, or narcotrafficking, is an interesting case study in how a more universal problem plays itself out in particular ways depending on the part of North America where you happen to be. It's also a good example of an issue that affects all three countries in North America. Yet we'll see that the United States, as the most important consumer market for narcotics, has had much influence in shaping how this continental public policy problem is dealt with, even when it comes to activities and approaches taken in Canada and Mexico. We begin this week with a truly infamous North American, Joaquin Guzman. He's also known as El Chapo. That's Spanish for Shorty Guzman, because he's only 5'6". He may be short, but he's big on bad reputation. By 2003, he had risen through the ranks of the Mexican narco hierarchy to become that country's top drug kingpin. In fact, when he was arrested and finally imprisoned in February 2014, American law enforcement considered him the most powerful narco trafficker in the world. The North American reach of his crime syndicate is so pervasive that the city of Chicago actually named Guzman Public Enemy Number 1, a label reserved for only the most notorious of crime figures. The famous American gangster Al Capone was the last to receive such an honor, and Guzman has never actually been to Chicago. But by the time of his arrest in 2014, his criminal organization, the Sinaloa Cartel, imported more drugs into the United States than anyone else. He has routinely appeared on the various Forbes business magazine lists of powerful and wealthy people. He's considered the 10th richest man in Mexico with a net worth of about $1 billion. He's often found himself listed somewhere between the rank of 40 and 60 in lists of the 100 most powerful people. Guzman's family was poor and lived in a rural community in the state of Sinaloa on the west coast of Mexico. His father was supposedly a cattle rancher, but many believe he was also an opium poppy farmer on the side. There were few opportunities for impoverished kids in Guzman's hometown. His formal education was done by grade 3, and then he began to sell oranges to make some money. He also started to work with his father and brothers, growing opium poppies. The brothers would farm the crops, and then the father would sell their harvests. The problem was, the father would then spend all the money on booze and on prostitution. Thus began Guzman's narco career. At 15, he started his own marijuana plantation to financially support his family. His father soon kicked him out, but with the guidance of an uncle, he was becoming increasingly important in the Mexican drug trade. Guzman left his hometown and entered into a life of organized crime. His career began with the Guadalajara cartel in the 70s.
That's just nasty.
Initially,
That is so
he was responsible
nasty.
for overseeing the shipment of drugs to the Mexican-U.S. border. He was a go-getter, constantly pressing for an increased share of the smuggling operations. His superiors were also impressed by his impressive ability to guarantee the timely arrival.
It's still recording.
Take note, UPS drivers everywhere. Guzman personally shot in the head any smuggler who didn't make it on time. Eventually, the cartel placed Guzman in charge of logistics, coordinating the land, sea, and air shipments of drugs from Colombia to Mexico. It's important to note that at this time, the Mexican drug traffickers were of secondary importance. The real power was with the drug cartels in Colombia. For them, Mexico was less important as a shipping route. The preferred path was actually to ship narcotics to the Caribbean and into Florida. As we'll see in the subsequent part of the lecture, though, once American authorities decided to squeeze the Colombian cartels, traffic along the Caribbean-Florida corridor shifted to Mexico. As a result, the Mexican cartels became ever more important. As they say, Guzman was in the right place at the right time. His next big opportunity came when his boss, the notorious drug lord Felix Gallardo, ordered the kidnapping, torture, and murder of an undercover DEA agent who had infiltrated the Guadalajara cartel. American officials were furious and pushed the Mexican government to round up everyone associated with the killing. Gallardo was arrested and then sent word that a summit should be organized to discuss the future of the cartel. Guzman was there. By the end of the meeting, the Guadalajara cartel had been divided up into 3 new cartels: the Tijuana cartel, the Juarez cartel, and the Sinaloa cartel. Guzman, as a leading key figure in the Sinaloa cartel, emerged with responsibility for border crossings between the states of Sonora and Baja in Mexico and Arizona and California in the U.S. He excelled in this new leadership role, and soon his name was appearing on American criminal indictments for shipping 4,600 pounds of marijuana, for shipping more than 10,000 pounds of cocaine in another, and then 35 tons of cocaine in a 3-year period. El Chapo also pioneered new smuggling strategies. Massive quantities of drugs were smuggled in smaller, piecemeal shipments to reduce risk, and increasingly sophisticated tunnels were built to move drugs across the border. By the early 1990s, the Tijuana and Sinaloa cartels, both formerly part of that larger Guadalajara cartel that had splintered, were in open conflict with one another. The Areno Felix brothers, leaders of the Tijuana cartel, were behind the torture and killings of numerous Guzman associates, and El Chapo was certainly made aware that his own life was on the line when a car bomb exploded outside one of his many properties. In November 1992, the brothers orchestrated an assassination attempt on Guzman as he traveled the streets of Guadalajara. Men, armed with AK-47 assault rifles, shot at Guzman's moving vehicle, but he managed to get away unharmed. El Chapo returned the favor a few days later when he sent his own henchmen, dressed as police officers, into a bar in Jalisco where the brothers had been seen. There was a shootout that lasted 8 minutes and used 1,000 rounds of ammunition, but the brothers managed to escape through some ductwork that was in the bathroom of the bar. Intense conflict between the cartels continued for another 6 months, but then it went too far. In May 1993, Tijuana hitmen descended on the Guadalajara airport when they heard Guzman was there waiting to catch a flight. Some 20 gunmen emerged from their vehicles and opened fire on the car where Guzman was thought to be. In fact, the Cardinal and Archbishop of Guadalajara was in the car and was shot to death. 6 others were also killed in the hail of bullets. Guzman was actually in the car not very far away, quickly got a taxi, and left for one of his safe houses. This proved too much for the Mexican authorities, and they moved in to end the violence. $5 million rewards were offered, and the wider public soon became familiar with Guzman's face as it appeared on wanted posters and in the media. El Chapo met quickly and quietly with associates and handed off close to $400 million in cash to support his family and narco enterprise. He then fled to Guatemala, paying off authorities on both sides of the border. He only managed to stay on the run for about a month before the Guatemalan army captured him and sent him back to Mexico. By 1995, Guzman had settled into the Puente Grande maximum security prison, where he was serving a 20-year sentence on various charges. From behind bars, he actually continued to oversee his narco empire. He was brought suitcases full of cash to use as bribes with prison officials. When it was beginning to look as though he might be extradited to the U.S., El Chapo decided it was best to escape in 2001. Almost 80 different people were connected to his escape, which is thought to have cost him $2.5 million in bribes. In the end, he was pushed out of the prison in a laundry cart and driven off in the trunk of a car. When the car later stopped at a gas station, Guzman got out, disappeared into the night. Even the local Jalisco police were thought to have been paid off, giving Guzman a 24-hour head start on his getaway. Some 3 years after this escape, Guzman then touched off what would become another intense round of warfare between cartels. He organized an alliance with others to take out the Juarez cartel drug lord, turning that territory into the front line of a Mexican drug war that saw competing cartels fighting for control over drug smuggling routes. Within 2 years, 50,000 people died. When President Felipe Calderon took office in 2006, he made it clear that his government intended to crack down on the cartels. In the end, the Sinaloa cartel experienced relatively few arrests, and this led to suspicions that Guzman was feeding intelligence to the American Drug Enforcement Agency and the Mexican government. Even El Chapo's criminal associates thought something was fishy. Before long, his top henchmen turned on him, and there was open rebellion within the Sinaloa cartel. This has since led to a split, with some of Guzman's former colleagues creating an alliance with the Zetas to take on Sinaloa. Guzman managed to stay at large until February 2014, when he was arrested in a beachfront area in Mazatlan. Some 65 soldiers were dispatched to take him in, and they managed to do so without firing a shot. He was taken to a maximum security prison by a federal police Black Hawk helicopter that was itself escorted by 3 other military helicopters. He's under 24/7 solitary confinement, and he's not allowed to speak with anyone, even the prison guards. While the Americans have expressed a strong desire to extradite him, Mexican authorities seem determined to have El Chapo face justice in Mexico for the crimes that he has committed there. As we'll see in the next parts of the lecture, the illegal drug trade is a complex problem that poses challenges both within North American countries and across the continent. El Chapo's story certainly points to some of these complexities and helps to illustrate how the drug war does not begin or end in Mexico. We'll see you in part 2. Bye for now.